Hello, my name is Jonathan Ringer, and today I'm going to be talking about the NixOS drama. Why do this? It's been 9-ish months since the drama kind of really was at its peak. Why do it 9 months later? Well, the real reason is that recently there's been people still getting kind of punished for kind of speaking on this occasion, and I thought that it would be good to kind of talk about it and kind of clear the air as to what actually really happened and at least give my perspective of this. The second reason why I waited so long was that there was a narrative while the drama was going on was that I was a kind of instigator of the drama, and so then me making a big timeline of all the things largely would have fed into that narrative. I was kind of just burned out anyways, so I was fine taking a step back from the NixOS community in general, and so that is kind of why I've been sitting on this for a long time. A lot of the effort that went into compiling this timeline was done during that period, and yeah. So anyway, for people that are not familiar with NixOS, what is NixOS? Nix is a package manager which kind of tries to accurately describe how software is packaged. The way in which Nix actually packages the software, though, is a big divergence of typical package managers. There's no package repository, there's no kind of stateful artifacts. Everything is kind of functional, declarative, and immutable. This allows for certain things like everything is kind of uniquely named, and then you can share these artifacts between computers, and you can have like multiple copies of libraries and stuff like that in your store. And then NixOS is just an operating system built upon those primitives. And the main defining thing or distinguishing characteristic of NixOS is that you can have a configuration file, which in a single file you can largely describe what you want to go into a system. This is what brought me into Nix, and now I'm going to go over kind of a story of the NixOS community in terms of its involvement with regards to governance, and then also kind of my interaction with the community, kind of resulting in my ban, and then where kind of the community is left after that. So my next story kind of begins in 2019, but for additional context, I really want to start with what the governance looked like within the Nix community during this period. 2015 and 2016 was when they moved to GitHub. And in 2017, you still saw stuff like this, where it's kind of like Eelco is still Eelco. For context, for people who don't know, Eelco is the creator of Nix. He was the one that has the PhD defining Nix, the Nix store, and kind of doing the functional programming as like a package management paradigm. So he's been involved with Nix since 2003. So even at this point in time, even though this is I guess it's 2025 now. So this is 8 years ago. He's been already doing it for 14 years. So over 20 years, Eelco has been kind of diligently either doing his PhD and making the tooling, or helping with packaging, or now he's mostly just doing maintenance on the Nix package manager itself. But where I was going with this, though, was that in 2017, you still saw Eelco Dilstra kind of have a first-line attitude about doing community governance. There was a particular contributor who was being disparaging against others in multiple threads. This is just the one where I saw where he came down on him. But there was no code of conduct at the time, but it was kind of just like a very loose group of people that were centered around this functional programming package manager, and the community didn't really have any formal structure. The NixOS Foundation did exist at this time. I think it was stood up in 2015 with, I guess the members don't matter right now, but the NixOS Foundation, they were pretty much the only structure there. The thing, though, is that the NixOS Foundation at this time could just be thought of as like an account for expensing. And so if you had CI costs, if you had infrastructure costs, anything like that, that would be charged against the NixOS Foundation. It was also the recipient of donations. So if you wanted to donate to the NixOS effort or ecosystem, then you would do it through the foundation. At this time, too, there was no actual formal moderation team pretty much it was just Eelco, and usually Graham Christensen, he would handle most of the kind of actual reports of moderation actions. Yeah, but the thing though is that and you'll see this theme in the NixOS community a lot, where it's kind of just like a lot of things were kind of very reactive. Since there wasn't a huge amount of controversy at this time, there was not like a good reason for individuals to say like, hey, we do need a moderation team. Most of the interaction within the community is just volunteers. Like, you kind of want to be there, so you're invested in it, and so you're not going to usually stir crap up with other contributors. And so then it was far and few between where moderation did need to occur. And this is kind of where I come in to the NixOS picture, though, is that in late 2018, I left the US Air Force as a programmer, and then I joined Microsoft at the time. So originally my goal with kind of onboarding onto Nix was, like, could I use this really powerful package manager in my day job? And that's also why I got into things like Python packaging, because at Microsoft I was doing the Azure Machine Learning platform, and one of the things that we had to maintain was this SDK, Python SDK. And Python was really nice because then you could switch between Python interpreter versions. Like Python 2 hasn't been fully deprecated at this period of time, so being able to switch between Python 2, Python 3, and the different Python 3 interpreters, it was really powerful to be like, yes, our SDK is kind of like compliant across these different interpreters. So anyway, that was my original reason why I want to get into Nix. Little timeline is that my first contribution to actual Nix was fixing up a little Python package, and then I was able to kind of slowly ping in people to get reviews and tests, and a lot of this work was kind of just remedial, like declaring of dependencies and stuff like that, and fixing and then building and whatnot. Let's just say that, like, I went full force. So you can see here between May and September, I did get my commit bit, and I will say that a lot of time transpired between those two, or a lot of work transpired between those 2 points in time. So in 2019, let's see here. Yeah, I had some like 2,000 contributions throughout the whole year. You can see, yeah, so September-ish timeframe. So probably about half of this. Yeah, so around 1,000 contributions to Nix within just a few month period. Like 61 contributions in a single day. So I was really active in like reviewing PRs. That was also my way to actually learn Nix. As I'm sure a lot of people know, trying to pick up Nix is a very daunting task, and one of the ways that I was able to kind of push through it, though, was reviewing PRs. I would read the PRs of other contributors and then pretty much just parrot what they said, and that was still highly useful, though, because then I was able to kind of gain a organic best practices knowledge, as well as then kind of give back in terms of reviewing other PRs and generally getting them into a more mergeable state. The following year, I nominated myself for the release manager for 2009. At this point in time, I'm just very deeply invested in the Nix community. I am continuing to just contribute quite a bit on a daily basis. Yeah, so you can see here like 4,500 or 4,600 across the whole year, and so I already knew that I was going to do a large time investment into Nix, so may as well step up to be the release manager. I get selected. I was the only nominee, but I also got selected. Felt really good, and in October I did my first NixOS release, and this is kind of roughly when the drama within the Nix community kind of started, and so then. Sandro is a contributor in the Nix community. He's very active. He's probably has more contributions than I do at this point, but let's just say that he did very pedantic reviews of PRs, and that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I I didn't think it was the right choice to deny him, but pretty much the reasoning that I got from the other release manager was that, quote, people should not just act that way. And for other contexts, I think he was a high school student, maybe he started college at this time, but he was relatively young, and yeah, it was just kind of a thing where it's like, because certain people had a negative stigma with him, then they kind of just like didn't want anything to do with him. And then the drama kind of continued with Super Sandro the next year. In this case, someone had blocked him, and then Super Sandro tried to go around the block to then actually warn someone. Yeah, he used an alt account, and what happened was, part of my efforts was to one of the things that I did was a RFC to change the release date. So previously, my 2009 release was on the 09, so that would have been September. I did a RFC to change it to May and November. This aligned more with the GNOME release cadence. And so then, yeah, Super Sandro is using this alt account, and then he's just saying that, hey, by the way, this is no longer going to be a valid date. Could you change that? And so I'm conflicted on this. It's like this was a meaningful contribution, and it should have been recognized. It's sad that it had to be like discarded in this regard, but yeah, pretty much people wanted to say that like, hey, and this is like a, what's the way to say this, like it feels intrusive and that this is not acceptable. And of course, later on, yeah, like I'm also following along in this period of time. I am not a big fan of kind of shutting down lines of communication. If someone irks you the wrong way, like you should just give them immediate verbal feedback on that, instead of kind of just like block and hope the problem goes away, and quote, they like get the message, even though that the message is actually that they can't interact with you. And the really sad thing about this instance, and it was the first eye-opening experience for me, is that no one was really kind of willing to talk to Sandro about this. And so then I had over Discord, we didn't have Matrix at the time, it was just IRC had just public channels. So anyway, I talked to Sandro over Discord, and I mostly just say that like, hey, by the way, these people like really do not like this, and also this behavior really got you in trouble, including like being denied your release manager nomination because of this. And like, hey, I just want to make sure that like you're aware of this, and that like in the future, let's try to do things like running a linting tool and stuff like that, which was a huge contributor to his pedantic reviews. That's another thing that I should mention here too. The Nix community is like a very loosey-goosey kind of duct taped together community, and what I mean by that is that at this time, like pretty much all PRs, the PR gates, all that they really did was just make sure that you didn't fundamentally break Nix packages. So it would just evaluate the entire package set so that other people could use it, and that was mostly the only check. The other check is that if you had your commits in a certain fashion, then it would build this thing to the left of the colon, and that was about it. So it would build the package that you're trying to target, and then evaluate the thing. The thing that it didn't do, though, is anything downstream. So if anything uses Pylint, which a lot of packages do use Pylint for the testing, then you would not get that feedback that something has changed or is broken. So nor is there any linting, nor is there other kind of sanity checks that are going on. So generally, the Nix review process is very kind of review heavy, or like manually comment heavy, and it is kind of draining for both the people with the PR who have to respond to the commentary, and then also if you're a Nix PR reviewer, then it's also kind of exhausting because you have to go through so many more kind of comments to get PRs into a mergeable state. The one thing that kind of was eye-opening for me during this whole experience, though, is that I this is kind of like when I first semi became radicalized, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of just like, I really did not like that people were shutting down lines of communication, and I'm pretty much willing to die on this hill that like we shouldn't be in an ecosystem where everyone doesn't want to talk to each other. That's not good. And like, obviously, I don't think anyone's saying that blocking is an ideal outcome. However, I don't think there was any really good recourse for kind of this event to be resolved in a better way. And this is also kind of feeds into my initial desire to actually have a moderation team, is that like this would be a good aspect for the moderation team to handle, where like they actually moderate a interpersonal conflict before it became and escalated into like a larger event. And yeah, so this drama kind of also just feeds into another incident where a particular user wanted to be added to the maintainers list, and inside of the maintainers list they just wanted the letter V, and Super Sandro just says like, hey, can you use deviant? This is your GitHub handle. It's and he somewhere else, I don't remember exactly where, but yeah, it's like for autocomplete and a few other things, just like one letter things is odd. And then also too, and I will say this is for myself as well, if I saw maintainers equals and then just a capital V, I thought that would be a mistake. Like, oh, did you do typo? Oh no, there's actually like an entry V. And so then of course they do kind of like a very short no. This person, who I feel really sorry for, tries to interject himself and say like, hey, like this probably isn't the best way to do communication, and it pretty much just explodes from there. You can see there's a lot of comments in between here, and then I finally come in and yeah, just kind of say what I think isn't or isn't appropriate. Like, this is really kind of just hostile may not be the word, but it's definitely not cooperative. And this could be fitting to the fact that a lot of people are already tired of Sandro's kind of review cadence, but like it's still just not great. And then also to this then kind of gets like blown up into the word harassment, that he's reviewing PRs in this way, and like he just won't let down. I don't know why it escalated this much, because Super Sandro later on says like, I didn't really feel strongly about this, I just asked a question, could you change your name? This also kind of leads into the 2105 release, so this would have been the second NixOS release that I did. I had to do this solo. No one wanted to propose themselves. Essentially, only Super Sandro was probably willing to do so, but he already got declined the previous time. And then the other awkward thing around this time as well is that in August of 2021, we have our RFC 98, and this is pretty pivotal in that it kind of established two things. It was both a moderation team, and then also the what's the word? It's not a code of conduct, although I think that was part of it, but it's these goals for the community. So the moderation will also take into account to model and enforce social norms, and then also there's a this one. Do not want to allow the Nix community to be a place for spreading ideas rooted in fascism and bigotry. Obviously, I took issue with both of these points. I think they're too loosely defined, and pretty much they just give a moderation team a blank check to do whatever they want to a community, and I did not like that at all. I'm much more of a process first person, and so I would like something where this is unacceptable behavior unambiguously, and we can moderate that. However, social norms are in flux at any point in time. Like, just think back 5 years ago, what was acceptable, not acceptable, and you can see my point. Similarly, fascism and bigotry, like especially in today's climate, like fascist is pretty much a overused, diluted term, to the point where like you do still have true fascist individuals in the world, and now they pretty much get a free ride because you've diluted that term to almost nothing. And then also bigotry is interesting because that's pretty much just like, I don't remember the exact definition, but it's essentially just like unwarranted discrimination against a group of people. But like you can be a bigot to what you perceive as bigots. So anyway. The interesting thing to note about the RFC as well is that the author of this is a individual called Irene Knapp, and Irene Knapp actually, at the time, what the heck? Get out of here. I hate this. Well, this used to not have a freaking pay block on it, but Irene Knapp is quoted in this Google in this Business Insider story that they wanted to pursue activism across the open source ecosystem, and so then they left their job at Google to pursue that. And yeah, it's just weird on the timing where in September, so the month previous, they said that they're going to pursue activism, and then a month later there's an RFC written by this individual in the NixOS community. No interaction with the NixOS community before that point in time. That might not be true. Limited to very little contributions to the NixOS community. I think they made some posts in discourse, but I don't think there was any material contributions at the time. Anyway, but then they come in with the RFC. The RFC, of course, with that kind of language, just turns into a pretty large battle over IDL. I mean, you can see all the comments here on the right hand side, but pretty much anyone who was active at this point in time made a comment or two, myself included. I particularly was not going to stand for commentary where it's like the ill-defined thing will cause just like very perverse incentives within the community. Okay, GitHub's having a hard time finding that, but yeah, it creates a situation where there's a moving target in what's considered acceptable behavior only for the benefit of the moderation team. And similar to what I mentioned earlier, they're just ill-defined, and I don't like the ability for the moderation team to kind of really do it as they please. In response to this, I create RFC 114. So this is a RFC to just distill down the code of conduct aspect of the RFC. I use the Rust code of conduct as a template, which, looking back, this is soon before the drama with the Rust community really first started in 2021. So maybe not the best example, but in theory, I don't have a lot of issue with code of conducts in their literal interpretation. Like, establishing that harassment is bad, I think is a decent thing. But my issue with code of conducts now is that more or less they are not enforced in a way that people would expect. And it seems like code of conducts are kind of just a weapon of convenience when you want to use it for moderation actions. And we'll see later that the code of conduct really never stuck. Yeah. The main thing for me, though, is that I wanted to keep it apolitical. So really fixated on the behaviors, but not really trying to do anything like social norms or fighting ideas rooted in bigotry. Like, if you're doing harassment to another contributor, you should be punished for that. Also, in that time frame, I got two release managers, so I became the secondary release manager, and then NRD, XP, and Tom Barrick come up as primary RMs, release managers for this release. So I'm transitioning out of my role as an NixOS release manager. In February, Tom Barrick made a RFC 102, and this was kind of the other aspect of RFC 98, which is the creation of a moderation team at all. As a reminder, Graham Christensen is still pretty much just the de facto solo moderator at this time. So this created just kind of like, hey, we should have 5 individuals. They rotate through, and now we have kind of a pool of personnel resources which can handle moderation events instead of just relying on one individual who may or may not have availability at the time. So on the whole, I think this is a good thing. And then, this also sums down the scope. So mine was to tackle the code of conduct, like what is and isn't acceptable within the community, and then his was more or less just the moderation team. So just how the moderation team gets stood up, rotated, and kind of the functions of that. In March, one kind of meta narrative I would like to point out too is that it's very odd for a community to have requests for comments as a means to enact governance. And this is kind of another issue that was within the NixOS community, is that there's not a good kind of meta level governance process for change. And so then it's very weird for having kind of a process which is usually for code or process or convention change to be used for governance. But there was really no other recourse. The only other recourse is that there was the NixOS Foundation and kind of like long-standing members that probably could have just like forced something upon the community, but that was not the way that the kind of community was ran, I guess. Another meta-narrative in this as well is that Eelco Dostra essentially wanted to do a very laissez-faire kind of ruling over the NixOS community. From my personal perspective, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he seems to be very interested in kind of Nix the technology, and everything else is kind of secondary to that. And so he usually gave very large allowances to other individuals to pick up the slack. The problem with this, though, is that then you had a lot of voids of power and kind of authority that arose over time. So one of them is the moderation aspect, one of them is kind of sponsorship policy, which will be relevant later, and a few other things where it's kind of just like there was voids left by what a BDFL would have fulfilled, and then you had a bunch of kind of other powers that were vying for that responsibility or authority. Okay. Unfortunately, in March, was this 5 months? My RFC gets into draft because essentially the RFC process, you need 3 shepherds for RFC to progress, but over 5 months there was essentially very little to no contribution to that RFC. In April, there was just a weird incident where this nuclear package, the upstream contributor, or the upstream whatever, had some takes where they just he pretty much the upstream controlled by trainees. So this individual got maybe rightfully labeled as a transphobe, and then essentially within the Nix packages ecosystem, then someone tried to like delist it because it was harmful. The take out of this, though, is that software is software, and even though you may personally find them kind of despicable, like that doesn't give you reason to then try to project your personal preferences onto an entire community. If it's software here, pretty much like Magic RB here, just saying that like we will package this regardless, and we have to move on. Like if you don't like the individual, you don't like the individual, but what he produces, we will still kind of package and support. But the thing, though, is that now we get this narrative of kind of like, if NixOS supports bigots, then it's hard for most people to recommend Nix packages. So kind of this like purity aspect that Nix packages has to be clean of racist, bigots, transphobes, and if we can't, then I can't recommend it in my circles and stuff. So this is around the time that I just get burned out between the governance RFCs and changing jobs and getting married. I largely stopped actively contributing Nix packages. So at this point, this is 3 years of contributions, 9,000 PR reviews, and probably close to 1,000 comments across Discord and Reddit. on answering questions and trying to help people with Nix, I just kind of go into senescence. May was my honeymoon, into June, and then yeah. And there's not a lot of drama that follows after that. There's just kind of the fallout of the RFCs for the moderation team and some discussion, but there's not a lot of, what's the word I'm going to call it, like triggers of drama at this period of time. One thing that should be noted though, which is weird, is that my RFC just still continues to languish, but during this period of time, the moderation team essentially just takes it upon themselves to make a code of conduct, and then RFC 114 essentially becomes unnecessary. The moderation team at the time just kind of adopts it without any, I don't think any formal power to do so, but the argument that was being proposed was that, hey, you're a moderation team, but you don't really have any guidelines to moderate individuals, so that's odd. And this date will be very relevant later on. September 20, there's another event that happens there. But the month prior in August is probably the beginning of the Anduril NixOS drama. And so I was still working at a different company at this time. I didn't even know Anduril existed at this point in time. I come into the Nix Community in November 2023, so this is all me researching after the fact. But the NixOS Anduril drama could be described as maybe not the, let's not start with Anduril, but the drama surrounding this event. There's kind of two things. So there's determinant systems. Determinant systems makes a announcement that they're going to be launching Flakehub. For context, for people that are not familiar with Nix or NixOS, flakes are this way to kind of describe like your input, how to do it. If I go to a repository and I then want to describe like my package and stuff like this is a flake. So if I wanted to describe my package here, and then also I wanted to describe like what inputs I have, so here I'm pulling from Nix packages, and then from Nix packages then I'm able to build my package. The flakes allow you to do this thing where now you have a lock file. So now it's like, before this, Nix was very reproducible, but it was very hard to actually come from the same starting point as other individuals, and so then flakes essentially allowed you to easily describe where your starting point was, and then Nix just allowed you to carry through to the end goal of building the packages that you want, or the development shells, all this other stuff. Where which workspace was I on? I was on this one. So as part of this, Flakehub is a proprietary service where then people can kind of upload the Flake artifacts, and then you can just request them from Flakehub without having to go directly through Flakes. The benefit here is that then it's kind of a more centralized store of all these artifacts, and so then they're easier to pull. In addition to then when you upload them, you can do semantic versioning and a few other things. The problem with this though is that Flakes were announced in 2019, and Flakes had been in this weird spot of kind of being unofficially official for that period of time. And the annoying part about this for the community is that it's like experimental but not experimental. If I write documentation, should I write it with Flakes or not for Flakes? And certain things are easier with Flakes, certain things are kind of harder with Flakes, and then it pretty much just created this issue where it's like you had two ways to describe everything, and it's very annoying. And this is also in conjunction with the fact that the development of Flakes has had like some breaking changes to the CLI and a few other things where it's been painful to kind of take on the Flake scenario, and also changes a few things about Nix itself. So like, for example, the Flake even though this says flake.nix, it's actually a subset of Nix, and it has to have like a particular structure. And so like certain things that were true always about Nix were no longer true. And pretty much the main criticism here can be expressed by Infinicil, and it's just like, I'm very disappointed. Instead of stabilizing flakes, essentially what Infinicil is saying is that instead of stabilizing flakes and making flakes a first-class citizen within the Nix ecosystem, that determinant systems, which is founded by Eelco Dostra and Graham Christensen, is instead trying to productize them in their like half-implemented state. And there's certain technical things that need to be resolved, and there's other things that probably need some time for them to kind of bake, and other things just need a lot of polish. And the problem with this is just like they're putting the cart before the horse, and it's really awkward for the entire community, and this creates a lot of animosity between kind of diehard Nix fans and people that are kind of quote at the top. So at the top here would be Eelco Dostra and everyone else that's kind of iterating on the Nix CLI. So like github/nixos/nix, not Nix packages, which is like different, and that's a package repository, but /nix, the tool. Yeah, and just further antagonizes the community against determined systems. The other notable thing that determined systems does at this period of time is also they have the determined systems installer, and a lot of people actually now DetSys installer. So in February 2023, yeah, so in February of that year, February of 2023, they have a brand new installer. The nice thing about the determined systems installer is that it kind of turns on flakes by default, and also it has a better macOS install story as well, where macOS between updates can actually delete your /etc folder. There's a one-shot launch CTL service that the installer creates that then will restore your Nix settings. And usually it's much more, it's like your Nix install is not going to break in between macOS updates. But people saw this as like determined systems trying to take over the official NixOS community. So now you have these kind of two groups. So you have like the Nix packages community, which has NixOS, the Nix installer, official NixOS images, and then you have determined systems, which is kind of just like kind of optimizing for the user experience. And so then they have it where the Nix installer now kind of just works better, but also works for more use cases, but it's not the official one, and the development is done outside of the official channels. And now with FlakeHub, essentially it's like there's a service that has been developed on top of this like half implemented workflow within the Nix community. Then we get into the actual Anduril drama. So Anduril, for people that don't know, is a defense company in the US. It is supposed to be, the motto there is the arsenal for democracy. And, that's one of the sayings of a founder. And the full disclosure, I currently work at Anduril, but at this time I did not work at Anduril. So at this time I had no knowledge that this was going on, and I wasn't really involved in these discussions at the time. I was still doing my little hiatus burnout. So in early September, the Anduril sponsoring EU gets posted on Chaos Social, which is a Mastodon instance. Come on, you can do it. Yeah, so the original message is that Anduril develops advanced technology to transform US and allied military capabilities. Of course, people were not happy about this. And quickly on the Mastodon sphere, people are like, like they, they were not happy. So the next day, suddenly, the Technical University of Darmstadt, where NixCon EU 2023 was going to be located, invokes a civil clause. Pretty much this allows for institutions in Germany to deny military-based research and funding. If I remember correctly, this was post-World War II kind of what's the word? Thought process that like, hey, during World War II, the Nazis leveraged the university system to develop weapons of war. Let's get universities out of the military-industrial complex. The problem, though, is that the event was to take place on the 8th, and then the paperwork was due like within 4 hours of being receiving notice. And what happened was that the NixOS Foundation and the event organizers essentially just dropped Anduril as a sponsor. Instead of jeopardizing the entire event, they just dropped Anduril. So they refunded Anduril the money. The individuals that did partake, they could not, I guess it's down here. But the impression I got was, okay, he doesn't go into the restrictions, but Anduril had to be removed from all of the cards. And then obviously, since they weren't a sponsor, then any type of visible space or branding or advertising were taken down from the website and from the venue. But you can see that the kind of the rise of the anti-military industrial people within the Nix, it's like Joe Pye here. The problem isn't accepting the money. The problem is doing their fucking propaganda work for them. So certain people within the Nix community essentially took it as the sponsorship was more than just kind of money for awareness. It was actually a partnership, and that the Nix community should not be doing deals with members of the military-industrial complex. Whether or not you agree with that, you can make that for yourself. My personal thought, though, is just that it's hard to make a definitive line where it's acceptable for someone to be or not to be in a certain category. So Microsoft, for example, does a certain amount of DoD funded work. Is Microsoft also in this category? Would you deny Microsoft? And that's the thing for me, is that it's just like, it would be really difficult to actually say like at what level is your contribution bad enough to warrant you being labeled as like propaganda machine. And then of course NRDP, my former fellow release manager, what we're doing is just silently enforce a given political ideology on the community for as long as it can stand until we have successfully driven away any and all detractors. Effectively, what he's trying to say is that there's going to be like a purity spiral, likely that people within this community have to be above a certain bar of efficacy, and it's going to be on a certain subset of very vocal people to determine that. And then Zimbottom here, who was a member of the NixOS Foundation as well as a moderator at the time, says, let me go back. The outrage against this thing was super toxic to communities, and this is not how we should go about things. Essentially, everyone on the NixOS Foundation, and probably the moderation team as well, were getting bombarded with just outpours of all this stuff. Yeah, and then just a little side note here, between the 8th and 10th of September, NixCon EU does take place. Anduril was dropped as a sponsor. Daniel Fulmer, who's an employee, he gives a talk on automating testing of NixOS physical machines, if you'd like to watch the video. But he goes about boot up and kind of board bring up, and how they use NixOS tests to then actually achieve that. Okay, and then immediately after this, or kind of during, each NixCon usually has a NixCon survey associated with it. And then in this discourse posts, Shrid, who is a Indian living in Canada contributor, just mentions that, hey, there was a survey that was done, and then for gender, I just chose other, and so then other doesn't necessarily mean a gender minority. I don't feel like, I, in this case being Shrid does not feel like the gender response is really beneficial to that, to kind of like the survey results, so he chose to kind of just say other. Anyway, this provoked kind of some individuals to look into him on his discourse profile, there's a link to his blog, and then in his blog, people found pretty much quotes by Jordan Peterson, and then things did not go well. So in this post, this individual says, hey, there's this page on your blog, Undoing Woke Invasion. So he's very anti-woke. This becomes the kind of spark of a lot of controversy, and especially this, like, CAF will be a common player in this, but essentially they take great issue with this. At the time, CAF pretty much had very little to no material contributions to NixOS, but was pretty much bombarding Zimbabwe with, hey, this individual is causing harm to us and others, and that shred needs to be removed from the community. And yeah, so you can see that there's some time that happens in between these two things. But so September is kind of when things were kind of brought to light, and then in the background there's kind of a bunch of deliberation on what to do with shred. During this time period, I start my employment at Anduril. In November, I began contributing back to Nix packages again. I was only passingly aware of the Anduril NixCon sponsorship drama. People would just ask me, they're like, hey, what do you think? I was like, I don't know. I literally have zero awareness that this kind of went on. So at the time, it was just kind of like, I tried to find some things, but didn't do a lot of research. But I did, at this time, know that Anduril was not thought of kindly within the Nix community, but I didn't have any concrete threads that proved that at the time. So I was just kept on the download that I pretty much worked at Anduril. In November, moderation team shoves through the COC, which was based on the contributor covenant. And the wording is actually very similar to what I proposed in RFC 114, so I was like, okay, this is fine. But the note that I kind of referenced to earlier about the RFC process, which is usually for code, I was still very annoyed about it because essentially this thing has been going on for close to 3 years at this point, and that the RFC process is pretty much just like highly unsuited for doing these kind of governance changes. And it's just very annoying that there's so much churn. And then also the RFC process itself with the shepherds and everything else kind of creates a situation where there's going to be drama that's going to like unquestionably get developed from it. So in 7 November, Shred receives kind of a private message from the moderators, which is one of which was hilarious. It's the please remove steak comment. And so then, his original profile had this big old kind of medium rare steak that he had, and along with 3 other demands. Let's see here. So what we're asking from you is that if you want to keep that content up on your website or social media, he's referencing the blog, like the Unwoke Invasion and stuff like that, then please remove the links from them on your GitHub and Discourse profiles, which is weird. So Discourse, I understand, because that's in the NixOS official spaces, but GitHub, to me, that's like your own personal development account. That seems a little bit of overreach. And please avoid the toxic threads where you get flagged. I think he agrees to 1 and 3. No. He agrees to 2 and 3 because they're on the. Do I say what he doesn't agree with? Okay, no, I don't. He agrees to 2 and 3 or whatever. Like, he didn't really care about the steak to begin with. Also, he didn't thought it was an issue. And then please avoid the toxic. He agrees to avoid toxic threads. But then I think 1 was the one that he started fighting back on. In particular, the GitHub. Because that is his own personal kind of account, and that's outside of the NixOS space. Over the course of a week, essentially there's some back and forth between him and the moderators. The thing that's interesting about this timeline, though, is that then on the 15th, PyGames joins the moderation team, and then PyGames also, there's other threads where they were actively trying to push through the COC before they were even a moderator. And then kind of my response to this, so like I get back into this time frame as contributor. I make a post on this thread, which unfortunately is deleted, but luckily Shred backed it up. So in this thread, I make the comment that oh, sorry, not this thread. Kind of moderation team accountability issues. Yeah, so over this, the whole thing kind of irked people. So this, to me personally, reflecting upon this, I wasn't here while it evolved, so I can't comment as a first-hand individual, but like second-hand and third-hand, it really just seems like Shred got labeled like he needs to go, and then there's just a huge outcry and outpour, and essentially what happened is that people just gave in because they got burned out. In particular, on the moderation team, Zimbottom got thoroughly burned out, and he just steps down from the moderation team altogether at this point, stating that he wants to focus on his foundation role instead, as the moderation role was burning him out. Ryan Mulligan and Mick92 also kind of burn out this time, but they're still on the moderation team officially, but just kind of more inactive. I should say that both of these individuals are Ryan, Mick92, and Hexa are very active contributors. Pygames later on becomes semi-active. Ryan Hendrick is also decently active, but more like Nix packages update. So like the takeaway from this is that the Shred event with like the outcry and the outpour to the moderation team essentially just makes it so that now the precedent is set that the moderation team will kind of respond to this kind of outcry and then take action thereof. The other thing that I would like to say with Shred is that also I think a lot of the community kind of baited him into reacting poorly. Like, sure, I could say that Shred, some of the things that he did or whatever wasn't the best worded, but I would also say that he was kind of provoked into that on multiple threads, on multiple channels, on GitHub and other things or whatever. People were pretty much just constantly kind of poking and prodding him. Like, being like a weird animal in a corner does not set you up in the right mental space, and so then I will give him allowance to not have acted in the best interest. But I will say that it is weird that like people essentially set the target on him in September and then just kind of followed through with getting him banned over the course of another month and a half. With that, Joe Pye kind of had this to say: we do not feel safe in a community with people who feel comfortable openly posting this thing. And also, to be fair, openly posting, this is on his personal blog. He didn't bring it into the NixOS community spaces other than having a link to it. So it's not like he was making threads on Discourse saying that, like, Jordan Peterson's views on gender dysphoria or something like that. He was more or less just, he had a link. If you want to read the blog, it's upon you to read it. So anyway, openly posting this sort of thing, or who feel comfortable with others doing so, it sends a pretty clear signal for that our safety and our well-being is not just considered that important, and that no one will have our backs when, not if, things go wrong. And then my rebuttal was that in the reverse, the average contributor doesn't feel safe knowing that they can be silenced, suspended, or banned for not exemplifying a particular world viewpoint. For context, I'm fairly libertarian. I'm pretty far on the personal freedoms things. Like, people have the right to think and say stupid things. Obviously, when it comes to like espousing harm, that's kind of where I flip it, where that's unacceptable. But that's not the case here. Essentially, he was just quoting another individual that they really didn't like. It's one thing if Shred was inciting violence, but as far as I can tell, which has been too much research, he was proclaiming dissatisfaction with wokeism, which includes many viewpoints, extrapolating this to be the sort of thing written by people who quite literally intend to murder us. That was his original quote. Seems disingenuous. On a related note, having Shred change aspects of his social media and blog site to prevent and ban action infers that contributing to NixOS may also include someone looking through your internet presence to find anything they may disagree with. Whatever happened to, I don't agree with Shred, but thankful for his contributions. For context, Shred has been contributing in the Haskell and Nix spaces since like 2018, 2019 at this point. So he's been around for years as a kind of drive-by contributor in this case. This kind of radicalization and stereotyping of individuals isn't healthy for either side. If anything, it just creates more animosity and division. Sorry, that was my own interjection. If this animosity continues, I feel like the Nix community will fragment, and there will be a huge paradigm shift as efforts to improve Nix will be secondary to uphold a hegemony. Okay, and then in December, after the fallout of the NixCon sponsorship with Anduril drama, there was an attempt to do a sponsorship policy by Tom Barrick. And essentially, he wanted to copy the Apache one. For people that aren't aware, the Apache one essentially says if it's not illegal, it's fine. And then in late December, we have Joe Pye who blows up on Tom Barrick. And the instigating moment of this is that Tom Barrick made a post of a Jeff Bezos clip, and it went over, I think, like productivity or something like that. But the thing though is that Joe Pye received that as a psychological kind of experiment being done. He says, I do not have any intention of giving leeway to someone displaying clear-cut abusive behavior, referring to posting the video. As Tom Barrick has done here, posting the video of Jeff Bezos, this is now a matter for moderation as far as I'm concerned. And then I rebuttal, attacking someone directly isn't beneficial for either party. It is divisive and antagonistic. People can have differing views. It's part of being human. If you don't hold on Barrick's viewpoints in high regard, then ignore them. But attacking him and then asking for moderation to do something about it creates an environment of, I received offense, now I'm going to have some regulatory body do something about it. Joe Pye 91, Jesus Christ, fuck off. How many times does this need to be said? Your fucking commentary is not wanted. This is none of your business to comment on. It has been made exceedingly clear several times by several people now that further discussion on here is not wanted. Is that clear enough now? And then I rebuttal, Nix Community is my business. I've spent a lot of hours trying to make Nix packages, and NixOS better. I'm deeply invested in the well-being of the community and related efforts. Joe Pye 91, that is not my fucking problem. This is not your fucking dispute to involve yourself in. You do not need to comment on everything. And then Pie Games, who is now a moderator at this time, treat this thread as locked, disengage now. For context, Matrix does not have a locking mechanism on the threads, and so then they don't have any kind of formal structure to do so. I do, and then I stop posting. I create a formal moderation complaint against Joe Pye 91 in this instance, and then, yeah. And then while looking at that, I was like, oh, I should also reference that one where he says the quote, and they're literally trying to murder us, or whatever that quote was. And then that's when I noticed that the post that I wanted to refer to was deleted. So here's the undeleted one. You can see here, 2 votes in the reverse. I already read this off, so I'm not going to read it again. But the live one, so it should have been right around when the unlisted happened. So unlisted, so there's a quote here from me, and then this there. So that's this is when I started noticing that posts were being deleted on Discourse, and that yeah, it's like that's probably the moment where I got radicalized. Like, hey, Joe Pye is able to do this like absurdly abusive behavior in multiple forums. Like, what the hell? And yeah, I did follow up later. This has been like February, I think, when I followed up. But I asked Hexa, like, hey, whatever happened with Joe Pye? For context, Hexa was Ryan Mulligan was technically still the lead moderator at the time, but effectively Hexa was the lead non-burnt out moderator at the time. The appropriate people have been contacted is all that he responded with. And then also when I followed up with PyGames, I was going to give you a formal, give me a formal warning letter, but didn't have the energy at the time. So I was like, what the heck? Like, I'm just pretty much stating what the code of conduct says, which is that abusive behavior is not good. And then I was trying to diffuse the situation, but getting potentially like, what's the word? A demerit for, I don't know. I thought I was in line here. Anyway, this would also really triggered me too, where it's just like, wow, not only do you people not really care about the code of conduct, but you're actively just, what's the word? Propping up, rooting for certain individuals within the community where they kind of have full discretion to do whatever they want with no recourse, while other people essentially just had to take the beating. So in this case, Tom Barrick was the original target, and then when I stepped in, I became the target. And there's really no recourse for that. And then also PyGames 2 was in the thread because then they locked it down. They also, the other thing too is that irritates me is that PyGames or any moderator should have said, hey Joe Pye, like you should at least calm down. This is not acceptable. And then lock the thread. Pretty much just not stating that their behavior wasn't acceptable kind of makes it feel like it was acceptable, which is the other thing that really irritated me. And then around this time, Redo Bezeris, for context, he was a former release manager as well, and he will make quite a few appearances in this as well. But he, let me put this in context. After the Anduril sponsorship, there was multiple people trying to entrench themselves into not getting the Anduril sponsorship to ever occur again. And he's one of the individuals. So Redo Bezeris becomes the maintainer of the Nix package manager. So in Nix packages, Nix, the package manager itself, needs to be maintained itself. So he adds himself as the one and only, apparently at the time, as a code owner. And then like this alone is fine. But in later events, you'll see why this is relevant. Also around this time, I want to get onto the RFC steering committee. Mostly I'm very dissatisfied about RFCs kind of languishing, and I would really like to see them kind of come to some resolution. For context, like the average RFC in Nix packet on NixOS gets like 2 years or something like that. It's something ridiculous where it's just like, if anyone wants to do any substantial change in the NixOS community, signing on to like a 2-year timeline is like a non-starter for almost everything. And like that is just too long and too grueling for anyone to really want to improve the state of Nix. Anyway, and then 2 weeks later, a week and a half, I get selected as an RFC steering committee member, and now I'm on the RFC steering committee from late January. February is largely uneventful. And then now we get into kind of March, and this becomes another little infraction here, I guess. Due to the kind of seemingly benign comment from Infinisil essentially says that, hey, this thing, there was a decision about some room being made private, and the conversation was not kind of open or whatever. It was done opaquely. And then I just mentioned that, like, hey, like, I'm still not happy with the way that the Shred event kind of happened up. You could say that I'm kind of rehashing things, which is fair. But the thing though is that, like, trust in a system can kind of come from like 3 different ways. One is kind of transparency. One is kind of predictable outcomes. Like if the outcome that you thought was going to happen, if it does occur, then you're like, okay, this is working as I intend. And then the other thing too is just kind of like trusting in the individuals. And the thing though is that, like, the trust has, for me, has been eroding, right? So like with the moderators and with the kind of the process itself, it's the outcomes don't seem very predictable, so I don't know what the thought process mechanisms are there, and then also there's very little transparency. So anyway, me getting triggered, essentially, I'm like, hey, like it would be nice to just have some transparency about these decisions. I think it was for the Nix packages improvement group anyway, it doesn't matter. So anyway, I get triggered. I just say like, hey, it would be nice to have these things in the open because I don't want, discussion gets moved to the Matrix's foundation channel because the foundation is essentially the backstop of all petty arguments. And then I also just kind of reiterate that I don't really like people snooping into the personal lives of individuals. I don't think it's appropriate. And then also people shouldn't be banned for having differing views. Hexa responds, we are not going to revisit the decision, and we have no plans to explain ourselves any further, which is like, oh, okay. I'm saying that the people who feel strongly about having an agenda-driven moderation body are spread throughout the community, and we will be self-selecting subset of individuals to attain power. What I'm trying to say here is that the moderation body, actually, the process in which you elect new members is not transparent at all. It's very opaque. Essentially, it just feels like these people come kind of out of nowhere, and then like, congratulations, they're moderator. Tom Barrick just says that there is a double standard in how certain community members are treated, and I think it was kind of in reference to Joe Pye being able to scream at others while, And then Rido comes out of nowhere. I think the list that you came up with, Tom Barrick, is needless noise in the context because this is just over intellect. Oh my god, over intellect. It's very early in the morning for me right now. Over intellectualization of the current problem. Jesus Christ. And then Rido also. What I'm certain of is that it's tired of seeing colleagues burning out and being hurt because you do not actually, we do not have enough of a proactive moderation body. And this is one thing that you also see as a common theme within the Nix community is kind of this emotional threat. That's not the right term. Kind of this like emotional plea. There we go. That it's pretty much like your actions are causing harm, and that if you don't do anything or change your behavior, you're a harmful individual. Which I hate. I hate that argument so much. And then I chime in when trying to find references around an event, around the original saying of "fuck you." I noticed that the posts were being deleted. Blah 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 blah. And then Joe Pye comes up again. I am not open to debate regarding this topic, to be very clear. And then I rebuttal. I feel like I should be, am I right to say, Joe Pye, I find your behavior of telling me fuck off to not be inclusive or contributing to a healthy discussion. I would appreciate you to reconsider how you want to engage in this discussion so we can have a positive outcome. And then the moderator, Hexa, just says, let it end here. And then I continue on. I think Shred's argument of my personal life is not your concern had some merit, and he has been a contributor in the Nix and Haskell spaces prior to this, and his personal views were not much of an issue. Most of the why are you being such a bigot antagonism was him fighting the perceived you are the enemy of the state. I didn't go into this in a lot of detail, but while that week occurred from him getting the moderation letter to him getting banned, essentially there was a lot of discourse threads. I think I do have some links to it. Anyway, if you want to follow up with that, you can. Infinisil, who kind of misunderstands what's going on, justify decisions properly, ideally referencing the code of conduct to make sure for the entire team to reach consensus on harder decisions and label it as such. In the end, the moderation team holds a lot of power and therefore is a lot of accountability for their actions. This also means that, just like any other team, it should be open for feedback to some degree. A decision log means nothing if it can't be responded to. And I mean, I agree with Infinitil here, like, full-heartedly. Like, moderation, especially when you're banning people permanently from your community, like, there should be a lot of substantiating reason for doing so. Just saying that, like, this person is a bigot or causing harm isn't really, like, beneficial. The rebuttal to this, though, is that then these things are kind of easily searchable, and then if you are seeking future employment and then people find this, then it could actually be kind of a long-term detriment. My rebuttal to that, though, is that if I'm an employer and I'm about to pick up an employee, I would really like to know if they're stirring up shit and why. I don't know. Whatever. Why does this matter? It establishes that the moderation team was already pursuing agendas while not feeling the need to be accountable. Jopai, Rido, Pygame, Hexa are all present, kind of showing a unified front of kind of activity. I should also note here, too, I think this was like pretty late EU timeframe. I think it was midday for me. And so then a lot of these people probably got pinged to then come on and say something on Matrix. I don't think that they were just sitting in the Matrix channel, because it would have been like 9, 10, 11 at night. And then this is my own conjecture, but Pygames and Hexa are taking turns in kind of the let it into here, consider this locked kind of whatever motif. Kind of really just shutting down communication altogether. The other thing that irks me about this is kind of like they don't want to take accountability, or from my perspective, it feels like they don't want to take accountability for their actions, and they more or less just like want to end the discussion and not be kind of, what's the word? Not be held accountable for what they did. So next is kind of Domen. For context, Domen was the release manager from, I think, like 2014 to, no, I think earlier, 2013 to 2017 or something like that. Like, it was something like 3 or 4 years. He was a release manager, and then more recently he created a company called Cachix, which helps make uploading binary artifacts from Nix into a cache much easier. So that's kind of a hosted service. And then also he's doing another effort around development environments called DevShell, if I remember correctly. Anyway, around this time frame, Domen makes a negative post about the infra team, Hexa and Delroth wanting to self-host the Nix cache. So this is on Twitter. The fact that the Nix infra team wants to self-host cache.nixos.org gives me shivers. For context, I think at the time, the cache at nixos.org was holding some like 400 to 600 terabytes of binary artifacts. And so being able to self-host that is a huge endeavor. And like the egress alone to get all the information off of the current S3 bucket onto self-hosted infra would be a lot. Anyway, so on the 6th, Hexa in the Foundation Matrix channel, can we stop this FUD right now? This is uncalled for and a blatant representation of the infra team. And then a little screenshot here, blah, 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 blah. Domen just kind of roaches out. Domen, he just says like, screw this. I think he makes his own commit, removing himself from the Foundation. Yep. And then, he just leaves and he says, whatever. And then Hexa is just like, I would still like a retraction. And then Domen just leaves the Foundation channel altogether. And it's just like, all right. Anyway, yeah, and then also going on in the background around this time frame too is Delroth wanting to get AWS access. This does two things though. So the AWS access should also give you access to the binary cache signing key, and so then I think I will give Delroth a charitable interpretation of his actions as he wants to be able to do the self-hosting and other cache mitigation stuff, but an uncharitable interpretation of his desire would be that he really wanted to have access to the binary cache key so that then he had more leverage to do things like remove Anduril as a sponsor in the future. If you have access to the signing key, you have a lot of power. So you can kind of quietly leverage that in a lot of ways. Anyway, NixCon North America. So in March, this event goes on. But it should be noted that Raito then adds himself as a foundation board member. So effectively for 2 months, so like in December of the previous year, he kind of starts coming in as an observer and then makes it official in February. And then there should be another individual that comes on soon around that time frame as well. Looks like maybe after this. Okay, but yeah, so now Raito is officially part of the board foundation actions. And then on the 9th, what's this? Oh, that's all Matrix. Yeah, so in Matrix, this is on the 9th. Is this around this time frame? Yeah, so on the 8th was when I was having the shred drama thing or whatever. So then on the 9th, I kind of say my piece that like, hey, I would really like to see that poor behavior get acted more proactively and in less of an extreme case. I make the argument that a lot of the drama in the Nix sphere is that like really small abuses kind of get overlooked, but then this causes a kind of escalation of events where then the other side kind of responds or escalates in kind, and then essentially have like just a big huge blow up of personalities. And that kind of picking this in the butt, nipping this in the butt earlier would kind of help with just keeping things kind of low consequence. And so then I also asked the team to codify their stance on political activism, stuff like that. The reason for this is that, well, one of the things that they said that, oh, I didn't know this was closed. Okay. One of the things that was brought up in the discussion was that Shred was displaying politically charged immature content, and so then that's also why he was banned. I was like, okay, well, if that was the reason for his ban, let's put in the code of conduct. Like, let's make this part of the thing if you're gonna moderate it by it. And then obviously you can see here that this was closed, and no one cares. So 10 March, Anduril gets revealed as a NixCon sponsor by CAF again. Yeah, obviously post this or whatever, and then just kind of make this jest that it's like, I love knowing that my contributions to Nix packages are making a difference to the military industrial complex. And then there's two things that kind of fell out, or two discourse threads that fell out from this. And so then there was Pygames, who then says that last time the Angel sponsorship was an honest mistake. This time it was a deliberate decision. And so this is where the divide between the foundation and kind of the quote unquote community kind of comes into play. Yeah, so in January, February meeting notes, they were aware of this. They were aware of the previous NixCon EU stuff or whatever, and so then, like last time, it was a mistake or whatever, but this time, like, they just, yeah, they took the sponsorship money for NixCon NA, and so I create a thread where it's kind of more or less just asking the open-ended question, which is, not that thread. No, it should have been sponsorship. No. Okay, so this is the NixCon 2023. This was when the discussion got picked back up again in the original thread. I created a different one. Whatever. Anyway, my personal feeling is that, like, hey, they should be included too. Like, it would be weird to disqualify them on some ethical ground, because then it's unclear for other individuals where that line is drawn. But yeah, in that I divulge that viewpoint, and then another individual, Patka, then asked the question, hey, why don't you tell everyone who you work for, which in a technical which is technically doxing because you're asking someone to involuntarily release information about themselves. But I will say, though, that in the conventional term dox, usually that's release of personal information, which could be considered harmful. My employer's on my LinkedIn, so it's publicly available. The thing, though, is that it goes back to my other point around should those that, like, I'm really not fine with people like profiling and investigating individuals in the community for reasons to kind of cancel them. And then this would be another one where it's just like, hey, I know that you went outside of the official NixOS channels to do so. I even had a meeting with Games to look over my GitHub contribution history to see whether or not that was conclusive, and that turned out to be no. I had one contribution to Anduril Jetpack NixOS, which was like a typo or something like that, but half the contributors in that repository are not from Anduril, so that anyway, the details don't really matter. It's just that, like, this irked me, and then I just came out and just cleared my name, just saying, like, yeah, I work for Anduril, but I'm not speaking as an individual that works at Anduril. And also, too, I would really like for people to follow the COC. Oh, did they delete it? Anyway, Rida makes a rebuttal at saying that my contributions are of low quality, and so then I'm also punishable under the COC. Anyway, yeah, so I obliged to clear my name, and then Games creates a NixCon, creates a thread called NixCon is getting sponsored by Anduril, what to do about it. And so it's pretty much just like, how do we deplatform Anduril? And so you can see this is kind of the anti-military industrial corporation people kind of talking about how to go about doing this, and then with some pushback from some individuals. But I create another thread. I don't know why I don't have it linked here, but I create another thread which is, should members of the military industrial complex be allowed in the NixOS community? I think should, yeah, here we go. Yeah, so I create this one, which is that, hey, by the way, they gave it in the past and now they're going to do it in the future. What is like the community stance on this? And so, yeah, I just wanted to have an open discussion about it to kind of feel out where the community was at, because I wasn't around for the first sponsorship, so I actually had no idea. On the 12th, they had the NixOS users against, they had an open letter, and then there was a few active contributors. This was taken down when Samuel DR rage quit the community, but there was 200 plus total signatures, and the letter itself essentially said that Anduril is part of the military industrial corporation and complex, and that the Nix community should not be involving itself with such characters, and that it is detrimental for the well-being of the community in the future and now. And then everyone signed below also agrees with this message. And so then, yeah, you had a lot of people that signed it. And to their point, if I didn't serve in the U.S. Air Force, I probably would be very sympathetic to this cause. Like, I don't know. Yeah, military industrial like the end result is essentially you kill or damage people or things, and like that's a terrible thing. But I'm also of the opinion that sometimes you need a big stick, otherwise people will take advantage of you, like Ukraine. So anyway, 13th of March, open foundation board call. Eelco Dostra, we the foundation are not the moral arbiters of who wants to sponsor us. And then Delros chimes in, how's that not a slap in the face of the community? This is all on audio, so I don't have a transcript for it, but the next day, 14th and 15th, NixCon NA takes place. Anduril remains a sponsor. Although all sponsors had their publicity kind of diminished. And what I mean by that is that I think they were supposed to have kind of, in between the talks, there was supposed to be kind of like a splash image with all the sponsors on it. That was not done. Anduril did have a table though, but wasn't able to display any large logo. Anduril, because I attended and I worked the booth a little bit, just had some swag. And yeah, actually a lot of people were kind of curious about us, and then I think the people that were not happy with us just avoided us. So maybe that's just my own confirmation bias. Anyway, Sponsor logos were intended to rotate in between talks. Yeah, and that's what I just said. Sorry. At this event, though, no Anduril employees actually did give a talk or intended to give a talk, so we were just kind of there. Yeah. However, the big thing about this is that kind of the fallout from the sponsorship, and this is where kind of the actual official NixOS drama really comes into play. I'm sorry, I'm already very well into this recording, anyway. But this is where the actual drama really escalates. And so Yannick Haag adds themselves. I forgot. Whatever. Wait, is that the right one? That doesn't seem to be the right link. But another Foundation board observer adds themselves, and they are also very anti-military industrial corporation. And so then, so that's to say that there's 5 Foundation board members that are largely what I would consider very Nix first, and then there's 2 that are very anti-military industrial corporation. So Ryan, spoke with Pygames and requested we postpone the next board meeting. Here you can see that Rido and Pygames being NixOS moderator, are acting together in side channels to then make a sponsorship proposal. Rido, Hexa, Pygames, and Yannick all pressuring the board into concessions on the selection committee. So there was a very long discussion talk on the 7th of April, sorry. And one of the things that was proposed, though, was that there should be a gender minority seat for the sponsorship selection committee. And then I did not like this because I think that it's 2 things. One, it's literally discriminating based on someone's sexual orientation, whether or not they are or not in the gender minority category. And then in addition to that, too, it kind of gets away from I'm part of this because of Nix, but rather I'm part of this because of this other category. And so then it deters from the mission of Nix first, and instead just becomes a long talk, and kind of like the president gets set that other things than Nix is really priority in the Nix spaces. And then Joe Pai and Rido proceeded at attacking me in the thread as well. So I have this objection to minority representation by a single class. It's I thought you weren't more qualified to opine on this than marginalized folks, but now you are suddenly qualified to say that the solution marginalized folks are asking for are just treating symptoms and not real solutions. Yeah, and so then, what was it? I think this one is the one that's otherwise, I think you should not take this personally, but your interactions so far have been quite low quality when it comes to respecting our time and our expertise when it comes to this matter. I would recommend you to document yourself on the matter before launching yourself in forums to explain your viewpoint, which seems to be ignorant of various science in economics fields and actual practical experiences in IT systems. This feels edited, because his original comment was much worse. Or maybe not. Anyway, but the general tone of his thing, though, is that don't take this personal, but you're misguided and you're a waste of everyone's time. Go preoccupy yourself in the corner while the adults speak. Is essentially what he was trying to say, and I didn't like that. Anyway, the other thing to note here too is that ever since the sponsorship was announced, and the Foundation board was getting pounded with essentially direct messages and other various means of communication that Anduril needs to go. On the 7th of April, I just nominated myself as a backup NixOS release manager because I've done it 3 times before, and I can do it again. And no one else was actually applying. So the call came out March 25th. And I do it on April 7th. So yeah, close to 2 weeks went by and no one actually nominated themselves. So I nominated myself, and then soon after WeGank nominated themselves, and then we got selected. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, Hexa was pressuring Fig Soda to kind of close on this, like, hey, we need to close on this soon. I think it was more or less just like a get this over with type of situation. Because the other thing too is that the NixOS release is it would be the next month, so April, May. At the end of the month it would need to be cut. So the beginning of the actions are 6 weeks prior. So actually mid-April would be when certain actions from a release manager would need to start occurring. So yeah, okay, this is kind of warranted though. That like, hey, we do actually need to close on this because by the end of the week, essentially, the release manager needs to do some things. The next day, Pi Games asked me in a private DM to step down. These are people. What's this link? Oh yeah. In the DM, she links, or they link. I don't remember. These are people that are on the verge of leaving. So then here's a thread about people that are just upset with me being a fascist, essentially, and being a release manager. And you becoming the release manager, even if only secondary backup, it is exactly the wrong signal to send it's the wrong signal at the wrong time. If you care about these people, I don't know these people, please consider stepping down from the role for this release cycle. To which I rebuttal, I think if there wasn't such a campaign to demonize, defame, and humiliate me, this would have been less true. Everything I have said in the past months, I would have said if I took a job elsewhere. From Anduril, I was speaking as a Nix contributor, U.S. person, and veteran of the U.S. Air Force. So yeah, me taking issue with the sponsorship committee having a seat designated for someone of a sexual orientation. Like, I'm not a big fan of just discrimination at all. Like, I would say something out if it was like straight white men only. I'd be like, what the hell? Like, we have like more Chinese contributors than English speaking contributors. Like, you're alienating a lot of people by that. Anyway, from the 12th to the 20th, yeah, a lot of the public discourse dies down, but a lot of the stuff goes into kind of private communications. On the 21st of April, there is a Save-nix-together letter which goes out. If you want to, you can read through this, but the main points, though, are essentially attacking the foundation board and trying to kind of put them in a very negative light and try to spin the narrative that Determined Systems is prioritizing and hijacking the community, all kind of wrapped up in one. So, yeah, a lot of people were targeting Eelco, who was the head of the foundation board, for allowing bad behavior to persist in the community. So RFC 98 was getting concern trolled into the ground. People at all levels of the project have engaged in bad behavior, especially if one is a committer, release manager, or heaven forbid, a foundation board member. Then the existing moderation team cannot safely touch them. And this is where I was like, oh, they're going after me next. And right now their sights are on Eelco, the big fish, but I am definitely a secondary fish for sure. Culture of responsibility without authority. Decisions can always be overridden by someone on a whim. Essentially, this is like Eelco would then push back on something last minute, or quote unquote last minute. They would scheme for a long period of time, and then when they tried to propose something, then he would push back, and that would be overriding without a whim. Current sponsorship crisis, concern trolling threads on the forums. This is pretty much my thread where it's like, hey, should they be allowed? And then also, I'm okay with this. Crossing of the trust thermocline by Eelco and the foundation as a whole. Practically every single contributor the authors have spoken with who is of marginalized background, so only one demographic matters, and a number of those people who are less marginalized was considering leaving the community for our safeties. The other thing that I would say on this too is that in like Macedon and other circles, like people were blowing this up to being like, Nix is just going to be a mechanism for war. And a few other things where it's like there's like a lot of hyperbolic language, and of course people are going to be super divisive and resistant if all that they're hearing this from is people who are actively anti-military industrial corporation espousing their viewpoint. Anyway, Eelco's role in cultural corrosion in the Nix project. Eelco should resign from all formal roles in this project and take at least a 6-month break from involvement at all to allow the community ownership of the project to get its feet to get on its feet in practice. I think this is ridiculous. You're essentially asking the person who created Nix and slowly nurtured a tool and community over 20 years to step away from his brainchild so that you can take over. Treating the project as if he owns it. I mean, he made Nix. Whether or not he owns the Nix community, that's a different question, which essentially he's answered himself by saying, no, I just want to work on the tool. Like most other concerns are for other people. But that's ridiculous. Anyway, I think this narrative on their side comes from the fact that he was the head of the foundation board at the time, and so then he would usually have, although he would like to say that he was an equal participant on the board and also an equal contributor on Nix, his referent power, though, because he was the creator of Nix, I would say was taken with greater importance than others, which I think is valid. Like, he's probably the one who invested the most, so he has the most stake, and therefore I think he should have kind of the most say. Whether or not that should be the majority say is a different question, but that doesn't matter at this point because he's pretty much delegated all of his authority. Building a culture of responsibility without authority. Multiple authors curated this document, so this is a repeat of a similar bullet point. I'm not going to reread it. Ignoring people, then relitigating. Essentially, if you people have a certain amount of ability to attend to certain things, and essentially, I think the PRs are for contributions to the Nix CLI. Like he had to get around sometime later to something, and then people didn't like the churn there. So it's kind of just like, anyway, the guy's pulled in like 10 different directions between the board and other things. It's like, yeah, his availability is not going to be good. I don't think this is a very strong point. Keeping the project incapable of holding people accountable for bad behavior. Yes. So this is kind of similar to another one. And pretty much here is just like the moderation team is not able to act without any type of guard. Eelco's repeated undeclared, unmanaged conflicts of interest. Here, the conflicts of interest, the context here is that there was a thread. Do I post it here? No, I don't. Okay. On Twitter, there was a thread about Graham Christensen and determinant systems and whether or not they had any type of cooperation with Anduril. And then essentially Graham Christensen makes a response that I can't comment, or I signed an NDA, something to that regard. And so then he kind of dismisses the thing. And so then people are like, oh, thank you for answering with a non-answer. And so then people took it that Eelco and determinant systems are working with Anduril, and so that was a conflict of interest. And then people also, through the grapevine, this is purely conjecture, I don't have anything to substantiate this claim, people felt that there was money on the table for the board members if they took the sponsorship. False. Anduril, determinant systems, and sponsorship crisis. The seeming complete non-movement on the issue led to at least Delroth and Hexa going on strike. So they kind of admit that Delroth and Hexa went on a strike from the infrastructure team, so then they didn't want to partake in that role. From this evidence, it can be observed. This also might have gone into the cache and Domen and a bunch of other kind of controversy that I hit on earlier. From this evidence, it can be observed that Eelco and Graham strongly want the Nix project to be a vehicle for advertising Anduril. Yeah, so anyway, people are reading into this more than they should. I don't know. Eelco's apparent views on the sponsorship crisis, some views of Eelco. There's also a thread within the letter itself where they have like screenshots of Eelco's. Yeah, here we go. Eelco's. And so then it's like the ones that he hearted up essentially were like mine and a few other people that were kind of like, why shouldn't Anduril be able to sponsorship? Determined systems relationship with Anduril, some screenshots supporting Eelco. I think this is the Twitter thing that I mentioned earlier, conflict of interest in his role, CPP Nix. CPP Nix is an interesting term. Pretty much this arises, like Rido Bezos uses this term quite a bit, but yeah, it's just odd usage. And in the Nix community, this is where I kind of first saw it being used. Reasons that the determined system is intentionally sabotaging upstream Nix. So people are reading into the thing that like the lack of flake stabilization is part of determined system's plan to rule over the community itself. And then kind of the conclusion here is that although Eelco has made significant contributions to the ecosystem, he is actively blocking the progress on extinguishing practically all the current fires at the Foundation and CPP Nix level. So they're essentially saying that there's like no vote of confidence and that he should be removed if there is no satisfying progress in action on Eelco's resignation from positions of all authority in all parts of the Nix project. By Wednesday, May 1st, we will intend to ensure this letter reaches a wide audience. Essentially, this is like we will be doing social media brigading and a bunch of other stuff against the Nix community if you don't give in to our demands. It is now up to you, Eelco, to commit to changing. And then my personal speculations, CPP Nix is something that like Rido started using around this project. In this time frame too, they being Rido Bezos and others kind of spin up this Nix project, which is a fork of Nix 2.18. And then you can see here it's just like Rido Bezos is in here, but also interestingly is Irene Knapp from RFC 98, who doesn't really contribute to Nix per se, but does activism across a lot of cross-cutting open source domains. So I thought that was interesting. Having essentially external people that are not involved with Nix involving themselves with Nix drama. Rido and Joe Pye are the only people who I have seen use. Joe Pye especially loves using the term marginalized folks, contributors, people. So anyway, I think there were at least two of the authors that are in this. Anyway, where was I? Okay, on April 21st. Also just to note, this was on April 21st, so they had about like 9-10 days to react to the May 1st deadline. And then this is just me snooping around the repository, but Quirad was the first to actually merge something that was not under the sudo account. And then Irene Knapp was, I think, like second or very soon after. You can see here, and there's just like an hour time difference. And then the anonymous initial bootstrapping individual does their final commit with like a benign blog post. Anyway, it's just very weird. Just very weird. 21st as well. Delroth, I do have issue. In this Mastodon post, so Delroth, of course, on his Mastodon posts that, hey, there's this now letter or whatever that's going around. The thing that is very odd about this, though, is that he doesn't really support that it's out in the open. He would prefer that it was done in private and that they would kind of leverage it that way. But the other thing that is very interesting in this is not, I don't see it here. Here we go. Is that responding to this thread as well is Pygames. Yes, forceful is likely the plan here, given that all other more civilized attempts have failed so far. So they asked me to resign. They likely asked a bunch of the Foundation board members to resign. And now they're going with this letter. So you can see that Pygames mentioned this on 22nd. So the day after the letter gets released. Anyway, in this time frame, this is where everything kind of went from like, oh, it's kind of heated public discussion to I feel like the whole community is after me now. So, in the days following, I think the Foundation now really feels pressured to give in to the demands. And then also there's a huge tone shift toward me as well. I think also too, this was much more of a campaign of besmirching my reputation and then painting me as like a Nazi, fascist, transphobe, all this other shit. So then on the 21st, banning of sock puppets begins, and so then they start actively banning people. Who do they ban? Yeah, so it's just weird. Like they start silencing people that essentially just peep up in Matrix. People dropping their maintainership. Oh yeah, another thing that's going on during this period of time is people doing these kind of like protesting maintainership drops. This is one of the guys that actually proposed my commit bid. So I'm actually very sorry to see Mario Robles to go, but yeah, it's just a weird thing where there's probably 100 of them now, I think, at least a few dozen. But yeah, it's like, oh, you guys don't know the harm that's happening, and then like link to all these people maintaining stuff, which is weird. It's like, if you're just going to drop maintainership, like I just quietly left in 2022 because I wasn't trying to stir up shit. I'm not going to be like, oh, drop maintainership, because like people are trying to push through RFC 98. Whereas like this one is very much like die on this hill type thing. Around this time frame too, I made a request to come on the board. When did I first post this? On the 8th of April. So this was before I put in my request for my the release manager. Yeah, I wanted to add myself as a board observer. So this was after the gender minority seat proposal, and I was just like, hey, I would like to I would like to participate in these discussions. Like, I've been around in the Nix community for years now, and it's really annoying to kind of see these discussions with like no interaction. And then also too, if you read the meeting notes that were happening at this period of time, it's very much the board observers and other individuals essentially trying to pressure the foundation into do something. So I was like, no, I don't like this community versus board foundation narrative, and also I don't like the actual agenda that they're trying to push forward as well. And then of course Delroth then kind of targets me. New NixOS board observer candidate working for a U.S. autonomous weapons company, paid by $1,000, casually complaining at a proposal empower minorities too much. And then also links to the discourse thread that I mentioned earlier. Can't even anymore within this community. So Zimbottom formally declines my request, though. It's like, hey, we reviewed your thing. However, like, to keep the community as a whole, we have to decline you. This means that the board observers must be trusted by the community. The current controversy paints you in a bad light. And then I did the rebuttal that it's like, you're never going to get unanimous trust from all the community. Like, that's ridiculous. People are targeting Eelco, so if you were to do a poll right now whether or not Eelco should be on the board, there's going to be a large outcry no. And so then it's just like, anyway, yeah. And then I just try to defend myself. Anyway, this goes on and on. Like, it's very dumb. And then Pie Games, of course, chimes in, and it's just like, I personally, John Rear, I don't think I've been personally attacking anyone. Rather, I've been consistently on the receiving end of steady stream of attacks, which I have. Where's my voice, my agency, my individuality? You're acting like you're a very loud bull in a Chinese shop who doesn't understand why everyone is yelling at you for breaking things. Just look around you. And this is pretty much in line with why I got banned. If you look later on, pretty much it was just a recommendation for me to be permanently removed from the community because I was causing too much shit. Yeah, on the 25th, Delroth mentions some statement with animosity toward people associated with the Anduril sponsorship. So this was in a Matrix chat. Yeah, he just said, like, well, it doesn't have his original reply here, but yeah, he said, we all know that everyone with Anduril is responsible for this or something like that. And I was like, I had nothing to do with either sponsorship, or were you referring to someone else? Kindly fuck off. As mentioned on Discourse, I think the time for civility is gone at this point, and one of us will have to go anyway, because personally I'm done tolerating your behavior. Which is weird, because at this point, yeah, Delroth I'm getting attacked on. Yeah, I'm being like asked by moderators to remove myself as release manager. And a lot of other Discourse posts, which I didn't link here, and essentially people are like calling me idiot, fascist, bigot, all the other shit, where it's just like, what the hell? Anyway. Rido then also calls for my suspension in a very vaguely worded post. So Delroth's got a mute for this essentially after. There was like one other comment where he says like fuck off again or something like that. Yeah, here we go. Delroth, not like that. Can you help please? I gave up on you and Anduril supporters the benefit of the doubt for way too long. At this point, I can't interpret your behavior in anything other than deliberately wanting to disrupt the project. So then he gets kicked from the room. And then because he got kicked from the room because he couldn't keep his cool, then Rido makes the plea that a certain individual should be removed from the community. In light of recent events, I propose a bold step, albeit absolutely necessary step, a temporary ban on the individual who habitually dismisses discussions as politics. This is not an act of retaliation, but necessary measure to safeguard integrity of our community. It's a call for accountability and commitment to genuine dialogue. In addition, I ask for the moderation team present. Present public apologies to Delroth. So, like, not only that, but then also say, like, we're sorry. The other thing that you can notice here is that I'm not here. However, I didn't make a rebuttal saying that, hey, is this able to make it? Anyway, I did make a comment. I don't think it actually renders my comment because it got flagged almost. Yeah, so it got like flagged immediately. But essentially my comment was just like, hey, I feel like you're strongly implying that it's me that should be banned. And then also in addition to the habitually dismisses discussions as politics is a misquote. There was another thread in which there's another thread where I said, the Nix community existed for many years as a loose confederation of enthusiasts. Now everything is political. Of note, I was just denied my sponsorship thing because of the optics of the controversy. So this was still very relevant, top of mind for me. If anything, I should have just said, now everything's political. I was just whatever. The thing though is that this is around the time too where they started making the narrative that I was banned. Sorry, I am a troublemaker or whatever. I'm just causing issues for everyone. So me also being like, now everything is political because, you know, I'm being like persecuted or whatever, I don't think would be received very well. So I just said, now everything seems to be political. Like, and also to like, if you take this in stark contrast to like around the time when I got my commit bit, like it's day and night difference. Yeah, all these things are just like way active, but like, oh, it's nice to see John Ringer here or whatever, in the World of Peace, who was the prior release manager, and it's just like, oh yeah, he's really active and nice to see him, blah blah blah. I also too initially let's see if it loads, but I also declined my commit bit too. Are we still making nominations? If so, I'd like to nominate John Ringer for commit access. And it's like, oh, I don't trust me, but I'm still flattered. Like, I was looking at these people. Where's my? Yeah, I rejected my first commit bit because I was just like, I don't know. As long as people review and merge my PRs, I really don't care for a commit bit. But obviously, the pain with Nix is that there's not enough people to review and merge PRs. So, okay. Anyway. Yeah, and then Marciam, who was one of the ones that recommended me for a commit bit, also too, they were saying that like I was being dismissive to him as well, which is not true, or that wasn't my intentions at least. So bottom then suspends me from discourse for 2 weeks. Something, yeah, I might have used my superpowers to silence John Ringer for 2 weeks because I was tired of his antics. It was just weird. Like, I don't have anything against Zimbottom personally. I think what was happening was just that he was on the receiving, as a member of the foundation, he was on the receiving end of a lot of hate, and then also because he was one of the discourse super users. Yeah, a lot of people were pressuring him to do something, and I think he was just broken at this point. Anyway, RFC 175 then gets dropped by NRDXP, who also mentioned the dissatisfaction with the shred ban or whatever. And then I was part of the RFC steering committee at this time too. So then I reviewed and said like, hey, roughly this feels in line with what I wanted to do with my code of conduct one, but actually sticking to enforcing it in an equitable way. The thing though is that I made that actually before I read the whole RFC. Down at the bottom, there is this evidence document where then it's essentially just a bunch of shred evidence. And then that is the context for why Samuel DR really did not like this. Yeah, pretty much just kind of rehashing of the shred thing, and then a lot of bad blood kind of came out from there. And then yeah, pretty much people were taking this document as being tone policing, but if you want to read through it, you can. Really, it's just like, hey, you should, let's see here, motivation, goals. Like one of these. We as moderators commit to basing decisions on general principles and concrete reasons that apply equally to all community members, irrespective of characteristics such as social, political orientation, economic status, identity, or religion. Like, I think most people can kind of get behind this. The thing though is that like the response to it is anything but that. And then people kind of just doing wordsmithing and stuff like that. Anyway, the thing though is I came out and supported that document because, hey, that's kind of what I wanted all along, especially with the Joe Pye telling me to fuck off thing. Like, what the fuck? Like, he should have been moderated for that. Anyway, after a quick review of the content, I nominated myself. Yep. Blah, 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 blah. I had grievances with the moderation. Yeah, okay. I just mentioned that. And then just a while later, 14 minutes later, I'm suspended for 6 weeks on all NixOS platforms. Yeah, derailing sensitive discussions and willfully furthering division of the community. Like, what the hell? Anyway, yeah. And then it was long enough for me to not function as release manager, so I was also kicked off as being the 2405 release manager. Normal moderation workflow ignored. Yeah, generally, like with the shred incident, you would get a letter, then you'd be able to rebuttal. You would be able to communicate with the moderators. Essentially, this was a unilateral decision. To the moderator's credit though, Hexa did reach out at one point and tried to start a dialogue, but then I was like, hey, there's 3 other moderators. You and Pygames are both essentially against me in this matter. I would really like for a moderator who wasn't actively trying to champion the opposing viewpoint to moderate this decision. And then essentially Mick92, Ryan, and Ryan Hendrick didn't want to essentially take up that reign. So that was dropped. That same day, Ryan Mulligan, he steps down. He was the lead moderator. He just, I think he was just burned out. He said like, yeah, I guess he's just tuned out after the shred incident. And so like he wasn't really even actively being a moderator anyways. On 25th April, yeah, I did a post on Reddit saying like, hey, goodbye if this is the end, and just wish everyone the best of luck, and like, hey, I would still really like to see the equitable moderation come in. You could say that this is like social media brigading type of action, which is probably fair, but like, I don't know, Nix is also a very big part of my past, and so like, I don't know, saying goodbye felt relatively in order. And yeah, to this day, I still think that Nix is really great technology, and really like to see it move forward. Anyway, and then on the 26th, concern, yeah, and of course this kind of sparks a large like, what the fuck? To which then that they start just kind of suspending and banning people kind of left and right. I think there's like a total of like a dozen people got kicked, including NRDP app codes. I think they got 2-week suspension or something like that. Yeah. And then the other thing that's weird too here is that on the 26th, Lazarus joins the moderation team, and then 27th, he publishes a letter, which I think was mostly drafted by where's the edit history? Oh, here we go. Yeah, so Hexa does the initial edits. Anyway, I guess all three of them probably edited this. But the thing though is that like the three main points that they bring up on here is John's PR applying to become observer. They make 3 points for saying why I should have been suspended. Me applying to be an observer, which is weird. Like this isn't even a point. It's like just the application caused harm, therefore we didn't like it. Which okay, that shouldn't be a reason. The only one that I think is semi-valid is this one, which is concerning the objection to minority representation or whatever. Sure, like that's going to be a lot of controversy, but the thing though is that like if you read the thread, then come to your own conclusions. John responding with everything is political. Obviously, like I said earlier, this was a misquote, and then they deleted it. Yeah, so I would have been like right here. I was in between here, so yeah. So they deleted one of the posts, which is weird. Yeah, and it's like, but the thing though is that like this is an incomplete list of interactions. There's just general pattern of him being a bad actor, which is not true. I just was fed up with the lack of accountability for moderation actions, and that it felt like just a certain narrative was being pushed forward. And then yeah, 27th essentially, like we given all the reasoning and insight we are ever going to give, hence asking for more is not only unproductive, it is also unreasonable and bordering on concern trolling. I therefore suggest dropping the matter. And the 30th, now people are calling it sea lying if you bring up any concerns about the moderation lack of transparency. And then around this time frame too, the moderation category on discourse is just removed. 26th, the day after I get suspended, Eelco drafts this post on Discord, on his own determined system blog, which is essentially just a want people to be nice. I must express my deep disappointment and disbelief at the accusation of excluding people from minority or marginalized backgrounds. As someone who highly values diversity and inclusion, this accusation is not only unfounded but also insulting. Remain committed. Yeah, and this is what I was saying earlier, is that a lot of these people are kind of doing the similar thing that they did to me, which is if you care about these people, like you need to do X or whatever, and kind of just emotionally guilt tripping Eelco into doing a certain thing, along with the other board members as well. Which, yeah, goes into line with Zimbottom saying like the outcry was toxic and all this other stuff. Even before this particular incident, like this has happened before. I just mentioned this community response. Yeah, so then there was a thread on Discourse, and essentially they just said like it feels weird for him to post this on determinate systems. My rebuttal or my defense for Eelco though is that essentially you guys are looking at all of his post history and everything with extreme scrutiny, and I don't think he really feels like an active participant in the community anymore. So I don't really blame him for taking this road. The foundation board, yeah, and then the day after that, the rest of the foundation board, so Ron, Theophane, Giannis, and Zimbottom are the same guy. They all said that like, hey, we also don't align with that post and we want to separate ourselves from him. The day after that, there is this document that was drafted by 20 plus people, and yeah, they essentially just say that like, hey, Eelco will be stepping down, and then we'll be going into Constitutional Assembly to reassemble and then remake ourselves. Then he publishes on Discourse the next day. One thing to note here too is that he initially did not sign the letter, and then one of the drafters said, you need to add yourself as a signatory for it to appear amicable. Anyway, secondhand knowledge about this incident as well is that Eelco, previous to this letter, also kind of already resigned to stepping down, although I do not feel like the manner in which this occurred was good at all. Imagine the thing that I'm concerned about is Eelco just essentially being beaten into a position rather than him wanting to take on a position. Anyway, there's a lot of gaslighting through this entire period. Eelco's abdication letter gets posted on Discourse. And then what's also weird too is Graham Christensen, 4 minutes after the initial post, then does kind of this like weird cheer type of thing. Kind of reminds me of like Soviet style actions where like there's a immediate astounding applause. Like he probably could have typed this out in 4 minutes, but I highly doubt that he would be aware of the post and read the post and respond to the post all within 4 minutes. Anyway, so my conjecture is that he had it kind of like pre-scripted. Anyway, Eelco's abdication letter posted on the 29th with kind of the fallout of my ban or whatever. Pygame steps down. In the end, this is just a silly, stupid software project. Like, what the hell? I'm fine with overlooking statements meaning frustration, but why invest yourself so much if you don't care? Constitutional Assembly. Sorry, I still got like a fair amount to go. Constitutional Assembly then ensues for Zulip discussion. So Zulip is a chat platform, and the Constitutional Assemblies, as outlined in Eelco's resignation letter, is essentially the means in which they will select the new governance moving forward. So an assembly will be elected on, and then Zulip will help facilitate the conversations around there. So other weird things that happened around this, though, is that the setup was mostly just coordinated on Matrix, and so then the likes of Rido and Joe Pye were picked up. Joe Pye, the one who told me to fuck off, wrote the de-escalation document, which is like, what the fuck? Endocrimes, who was maintaining, I think, the Kubernetes package or whatever, kind of stepped up and then wrote a COC specifically for this. Infinicil largely facilitated a lot of this, getting things moved through and whatnot. And then also one weird stipulation too is that banned individuals, myself, NRDXP, AppCodes, who was a co-author, I think, for RFC 175, we were all banned or suspended, I guess technically, are allowed to join. However, they get one shot in the conversation with extreme prejudice. If they blow it, it's a permanent ban. Yeah, so it's kind of the thing where it's like they can join, but if we find any fault with them, then they go. So in my plan was just like, hey, these 5 other people can speak for me. So Infinicil, Samuel DR, Erickson, Infinicil, a long-time Nix contributor, maintains like the Nix packages lib and all this other stuff. Samuel DR just maintained a massive number of projects in the Nix ecosystem. Erickson's on the Nix maintainer team and a lot of work in that realm. NRD, co-release manager, a bunch of other stuff. And then I have similar viewpoints to NRDXP and Shea Levy. So then these are the 2 that are kind of speaking for me politically, and then for Nix interests are essentially these 3. Unfortunately, CMDR didn't want to take any part. Didn't want to partake. Erickson, since she was probably doing better things, and then Infinicil is essentially a moderator and something else in the community. So Shea Levy was really the only one that did discussions, and of which there was a lot. So like over the one main weekend, there was like 1,300 notifications that I saw on my Zulip tab alone, and it's just a bunch of discussions, usually rehashing a lot of political stuff. And then also there was one particular thread of interest, which is like Marsam. I understand it's difficult to convey this to white cis males because the system was built to serve you. As Jeremy Scahill wrote, the best white people can do is recognize they're recovering racist. We're born into a system that tells us we rule. And then Shea Levy responded, I'm not a racist, recovering, or otherwise. I deeply resent that ascription of any character trait, let alone such a vile one, to me on the basis of the color of my skin. This is deeply inappropriate for this venue, which is absolutely true. Then Shay Levy says, hey, this is actually in the COC, and then if you want good faith, you need to act upon it. And so then he as an Infinicil does conclude that the COC was violated, and Marsam was actually asked to apologize, which he does. I apologize to Shay Levy. I use that quote. Anyway, the interesting thing, though, is that within a day and a half later, Hexa notes that Shay Levy has been suspended until the assembly is formed, and then I express outrage toward Shay Levy's ban. Of course, any in particular reason why I want to know why Shay Levy was banned? Because the intent of this discussion was to invite everyone in good faith, heal wounds, and move forward together. Exclusion of individuals should only be done if they demonstrate an inability to collaborate. For every active participant in these discussions, there have been many more who really never speak. Shay Levy aligns with some of my sentiments, so unless he has demonstrated a personal inability to conduct himself in a productive manner, then I believe he should be allowed to continue. To which they say, fuck you. So, yeah. And just some other interesting things. It's just like, we've spoken to the involved parties about the reasons for their suspensions, and both have amicably agreed to them. In Shay Levy's case, this was primarily related to a pattern of bad faith invitations to debate that led to the exclusion of other participants. I should note here that then, do I have it linked here? Shay Levy then writes a very long document saying that that is all bullshit, and essentially she just woke up one morning and they're like, you're getting banned. So yeah, I think they're kind of lying through their teeth and passing it off as more palatable. Anyway, it's just it's just the same story over and over again. It's like me being angry about it, and then Joe Pye comes in. This is not demanding transparency. It's challenging moderation decisions. And it's about trusting the system. Transparency is just one means of doing so. If people believe that Shay was acting in good faith but was punished, then it brings into question the whole goal of the underlying diverse community as a whole. So it's like, I'm just trying to say, it's just like the outcome doesn't seem predictable, and you guys are kind of challenging good faith in this entire process because you guys seem to be going through a certain political narrative. This is wrong. Actually, all the NixOS moderators were also Zoo moderators, so Hexa was within his right. I retract my delegation of my voice. Yeah, pretty much after Shay got banned, pretty much was just Infinicil that was actively participating, and Infinicil wasn't actually participating in the discussions. He was more or less just a moderator facilitating things. So I just retracted my delegation of voice because it didn't mean much at this point. Shay Levy writes a detailed blog, which I mentioned earlier. A non-Nix community member posts on, oh yeah, this is fine. And then the same day, essentially, then someone tries to get Shay Levy banned because the October 7th Hamas attacks. He says maybe Israel will finally just obliterate these savages, meaning Hamas, he clarifies later, instead of feeding them and legitimizing them. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, since you brought it, yes, I think the October 7th attacks revealed again that Hamas and the others who participated are worse than savages and they deserve to be obliterated. Anyway. The thing though is that it's like you had a guy with a Palestinian flag coming in and then trying to get him banned. Let's see here. Also of note, I think Shay Levy is Jewish. Anyway. Sources tweet, yeah, okay. Align just what I just mentioned. Nix Constitutional Assembly applications open. This is on the weekend that I was traveling with my wife, and so I wrote it on my phone, and so mine looks like absolute butt. The others actually have much nicer structure, but yeah, it's just hey, I would like to participate in this thing. And then the next day it gets rejected. Thanks for your application. I'm sorry, but I trust that you're applying in good faith, but being suspended, you're not in a position to apply for this assembly. The next day after that, I think Theo Fana is one of the NixOS board foundation members. They talked to the NixOS moderators. Moderators like, no, let's have this go through, and then let's just formally reject them then. So after discussing with the moderation team, we agree that suspended people shouldn't be forbidden to apply. So I've put forward your application here. I'm awfully sorry for the undo. Yeah. Yeah, and then I replied to the letter that I am applying in good faith, though. I've invested many thousands of hours of my life into Nix, and I would like to see the technology and community thrive. Okay, on the 9th, pretty much after the banning of Shay, things really simmer down on the Zulip front, people know that like, hey, you're likely this pretty much is just an echo chamber now. And then another Nix contributor makes another blog why generic open source projects can't also be successful. So essentially expanding on that, open source projects really shouldn't be doing political things. Then leading up to my ban, Hexa attempts to remove r/Reddit as an official NixOS space because that was one of the platforms that I kind of had. And yeah, essentially got rebuttal from Rock Garbus, who was the homepage guy, saying that as part of the front page and marketing team, like, hey, it's still within the sphere of NixOS, and so then like we would like to keep it around there. Yeah, it's currently a major contributor to social issues in the community. Games, just open the subreddit and have a look. People banned over here, causing discord and spewing hatred, which I don't think I did. That's debatable because apparently their viewpoint of hatred is different than mine. RFC steering community, right, makes a warning that it is inactive. This is just a bureaucratic thing or whatever. There was no discussion for 2 weeks, so it got marked inactive. Rido suggests that's different as inactive, and then I try to bounce it up later on once I was unsuspended. And then another weird thing during this time as well is that Rido tries to change Nix here. He tries to argue that Lix should be the Nix package manager. So not the official NixOS Nix CLI, but the Lix project should now be the official package manager for Nix. Eelco, of course, responds, no, this is not. This is NixOS, not LixOS. You are free to make your own distro, though, of course. And then to me, I feel like this is just a huge personal slap to Eelco. Like, what? Anyway. Zabatum publicly steps down from the foundation board. And then on the 10th of June, I get actually banned. Pretty much what happens... 10th, I get unsuspended, excuse me. And then I reach out to Domen, who gave me my original commit bit. Hey, like, I would like to... I'd like to be a committer again. During this time too, I've revived the RFC 175, saying that like, hey, the discussion probably stalled because people actually have received a moderation action or participating in this, so obviously people aren't incentivized to participate. Yeah, and from the 11th to the 19th, I do a little bit of PR reviews, but it's very annoying because, like, even if I review PR and I hit, like, accept or whatever, then I can't actually merge the thing. So then the next day I did get my commit bit, and then I was able to merge it, go back and merge it. But the thing, though, is just, like, Nix packages has the issue that there's not enough people to merge things. So, like, being able to review stuff is good, but, like, being able to merge stuff is infinitely better. The other thing too is that I think Hexa tried to provoke me to having kind of like bait me into a reaction by trying to remove me. He just frames it as update the Python member teams. Like, oh, you haven't been very active. And it's like, okay, yeah, for 18 months up until November of 2022, that's probably fair. But like I helped out with the last stabilization and whatever else. So please don't remove me. And then also I was banned for the last 6 weeks. Hard to judge, given that you were also away for 2 years before that. Anyway. Domen replies in private DM. Could you post... Domen replies to my request for commit bit. Hey, could you post on the commit request GitHub issue? So I do. As I was making the request, I was like, oh, hey, I should also say that, like, I also did not like the conditions in which I was suspended. And of course, this provokes a lot of stuff where it's like, what the hell? Anyway, this is probably the one that I really messed up the most, though. Like, being like, shit, I'm trying to get pushed out of the Nix community again. Then I go back to my comfort of Reddit, which I should not have done. Just open the question, and it's like, anyway, there was some discussion, but it's just kind of like, whatever. Yeah, I looking back on this is the one that I kind of regret. Like, I should not have done that. Yeah. pretty much it was just like I didn't have a lot of other people to kind of reach out to, so then I reached out to Reddit, and Reddit's just like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, this is not appropriate. And then I was just like, yeah, fair enough. And then instead of polluting the request thread with a bunch of stuff about people being angry about me, I just create another thread, which obviously the title should have been kind of more like a thread around John Ringer's commit bit, instead of kind of more baiting question. The thing though is that like pretty much everything I asked, like threads though are exploring a topic, so a question seems relevant. I don't know, whatever. Yeah, I think it's a valid argument that this could have been better worded, or not a question at least. Anyway, so then the discussion goes into here, in which it's pretty much just a bunch of people kind of shitting on me. If you want to read that, you can. Blah 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 blah. And the thing though is like, then people kind of do the relitigating defense, to which I wasn't part of the initial discussion to begin with. So to me, this isn't relitigating; it's the first litigation. And then Infinicil is just like, hey, can you stop? Now you're just instigating further division, which is probably fair. But the thing though is that it's like, I just want my commitment back, and then I was told to jump through some hoops. Yeah, maybe I didn't do the best job jumping through them, but what the hell. I tried to, yeah, and then at a certain point, then I pretty much after Infinicil said stop provoking people, then it's just like, yeah, I just like then just try to defend myself in terms of like my actions and all this other stuff, and then someone said I was a security risk, and I try to respond to that. And yeah, it's just like, what the hell. For the rest of the day, I review some PRs, and then the next day Hexa closes the discourse thread, and then the Constitutional Assembly meets, and then they get the recommendation to the moderation team that I should just be banned, with really no, pretty much just saying that things happened. I don't know. If you would like to read it, you can go for it. But the thing that I would like to point out though is that there's no point here where it's like I blatantly, okay, there's a double standard. So the people that blatantly violated the COC, no recourse, and then me, who's just angry about it not being enforced, essentially gets punished. And then post ban, yeah, Hexa Delroth talking about and then is all this weird stuff immediately happens afterwards. There's Hexa and Delroth in the Licks Matrix talking about it, purging the Nix community of Nazis, all this other stuff, where it's kind of just like, hence that there was like a lot of kind of side channels going on about defaming and deplatforming myself and other individuals. RFC 175 gets closed due to unrealistic path forward, which is probably fair. Essentially, that's just a landmine that no one wants to touch. And then the last event that I have on here is that Theophane, one of the other members of the foundation board, steps down. The recent drama craziness that spawned in the community a few months ago has killed my motivation to keep contributing. I have been truly amazed and inspired at the overall commitment of most of the community members in improving things and keeping the boat afloat, whatever their vision of a successful community was. But I also have been deeply hurt by some behaviors. This is like the toxic outrage, when people consider that pushing for their idea of a successful community was worth spreading hate, defamation, fear, and exclusion, or by the too recurrent thinking that one's own agenda was more important than honesty, truth, care for others. I've also told, he works at Tweed, and then he's removing himself as group lead in Tweed. And then, just add context, Domen left back in March, Eelco resigned in April, Zimbaton in May, Theophane in June. So currently right now, there is a election going on for reconstituting the Nix board, and Ron is effectively the only active member of the board right now. And then, since I got to the end of the events, where does this leave the Nix community? This leaves the Nix community in kind of a spot where there's just like a lot of underlying pain and whatnot that is it's like a powder keg. Like all of this kind of cracks and division is still there. There's just like a very thin veneer of peace for the time being, but pretty much in the future, if there's another sponsor that people take issue with, let's say outside of the military industrial corporate, let's say like someone who rejected DEI or something like that wants to then sponsor Nix, I'm sure that's going to provoke a huge reaction and stuff like that, where it's just like, I don't know, I feel like because bad behavior was not kind of nipped in the butt to begin with, and the standard was set that like, hey, you need to abide by this kind of acceptable behavior, that people essentially take it that like you can do whatever, and then eventually if you just cry, do like enough of an outcry and be enough of a pain, that people will eventually give in. And that's some of my concern about the Nix community going forward. I do want Nix to be super successful, because I still believe that the underlying technology is fantastic. Nix packages has a lot of rough pain points. The Nix CLI interface has a lot of pain points. The Nix packages ecosystem has a lot of pain points, but the mission statement is essentially trying to package all known software. So that's just a very hard and difficult task to begin with. So it's just a difficult domain, so it's going to be a difficult solution. Yeah, and I am trying to do my own thing with Ecla and trying to do a poly repo thing. Look at Project Ecla if you want. But the thing though is that it's like, in conclusion, it's just like, I don't. People keep making this narrative that I'm a Nazi, fascist, transphobe. It's like, that was never my intention. Like, I served with people. I served in the military with people that are gay. Like, I don't have anything. I don't have a, what's the word? I don't look down upon them or whatever. I see them as equals. Like, I don't know. They're also my friends. They're also people that I work with. And it's like, I really don't care. Like, I'm pretty far on the personal freedoms level. Like, I'm like, be you, whatever. The thing though is that it's like, also let other people be them. And that was my major issue with this. And apparently that labeled me as a Nazi, as a fascist, and as a transphobe. And so anyway, I say all this just because that's how I remember it. I have receipts for most of this, and that is my perspective on the events. Whether or not I should have been banned for it, I don't think so, but that's where we are. The other thing too is just like, even if I were invited back into the Nix community, these individuals that essentially defame and whatever toward me still exist, and so it's like, I don't know whether or not I would even want to participate, just because I know that I'm always just like a eggshell away from releasing that Kraken. And yeah, and for anyone else who's kind of been caught in the crossfire through all this drama, I apologize. It never was my intention to really stir the pot, so to speak, but like, I really just want to draw the lines in the sand what is and isn't acceptable behavior. I really think that if Joe Pye got like a immediate and public reprimand for saying fuck off or whatever, a lot of this I probably would have gave a lot more lenience to. Like, oh, like, the moderators are still moderating or whatever. They're not covering the tracks. They're not deleting posts. They're not doing whatever. But that doesn't seem to be the case. And pretty much there wasn't a lot of signal back to me that they were doing the right thing. So that encouraged me to just kind of like be more stubborn. And, well, we know where that ended up. So anyway, with that, I just want to say thank you for listening and following through. I'll have a link to all this in the description, and you have a great day. Bye.